I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and I'm speaking with Hao Wu, one of the directors of the documentary 76 Days, which chronicles the start of the lockdown in the Wuhan province of China when COVID first broke out. First question I wanted to ask you is, have you heard anything from your co-directors in China about what the situation in Wuhan and China overall is like right now, and whether or not they have access to any of the vaccines?
Yes, I'm still in constant communication with my co-directors in China, based on what I learned, not just from them, but also from friends and families in China. Right now, the COVID situation in China is pretty stable. I mean, there have been a few cases here and there, but I think the government has done a pretty good job in controlling the initial outbreak. So after the 76 days of lockdown in Wuhan, I think the COVID pretty much disappeared in China. So right now in China, people's life has come back to some kind of a normal. People can travel, can go to restaurants. Even movie theaters have completely reopened.
And did they not have like the seasonal spikes like we had around winter, where in the U.S. the rates of infection went up highly? They didn't have that.
Nothing like that at all. There were a few scares here and there in different cities, but every single time, if there were more than like 10 cases, identified, the government will pretty much shut down that entire city again, and asking every resident to go through PCR nucleic acid tests to basically to find out anybody who contracted COVID-19 and quarantine them. So the government has been doing a very centralized and kind of effective control measures in that country to really tamp it down.
So how going back to when you first started this documentary, how did you get access to these hospitals in Wuhan during the initial lockdown that happened over there?
I started researching this film in early February, about maybe 10 days after the lockdown happened, because at that time, I think the COVID-19 outbreak was pretty much limited to Wuhan. And I was hearing so many horror stories, not just from print news reporting, as well as some videos shared on social media, shot on people's phones, right? So I reached out to friends and to friends in the media industry in China, trying to get introduced to filmmakers as well as reporters who had started filming in Wuhan. That's how I found my two collaborators. So by the time I got in touch with my two eventual co-directors, they had already started filming inside the hospitals. One of them, Wei Chen, he's a video reporter for Esquire China, but he's also an aspiring documentary filmmaker. So he wasn't sent by Esquire China to go report on the situation of the lockdown. As soon as he heard the lockdown was happening, he flew himself to Wuhan because he wanted to document history. And even though he has a reporter badge, he was turned down by 4 different hospitals. And later on, through personal connections, he got introduced to a medical team that was being sent from elsewhere in China to support a local hospital. Because at that time, Wuhan hospitals were overwhelmed by patients banging on the door trying to be admitted. So since he arrived at the receiving hospital in Wuhan together with the medical team, so for a while, the local hospital thought he was working, he was part of the medical team, but eventually later on, he explained himself, he was doing this project independently. But that's how he got access. My other co-director, Anonymous, he's a photojournalist working for a local newspaper, and he was sent to the hospital to take photos to accompany their news stories. That's how he got a lot of access. He filmed in 3 different hospitals himself. Both of my co-directors, they didn't know each other. They were just filming independently and individually. I think that because there's a lot of sensitivity around COVID narratives coming out of China, so that's why the second co-director opted to remain anonymous.
Yeah, I was just wondering, could you just go into a bit more detail about why about some of those reasons why the third director chose to be credited as anonymous? Was it because he worked for state media?
Absolutely. I think starting in March, as the U.S. government wrapped up its criticism of China, trying to blame China for everything, calling this, the President Trump was calling this, Wuhan virus and China flu, etc. So it's creating a lot of geopolitical tension, and China was getting increasingly protective of its image, as well as trying to control the narratives. So I think starting in mid-March, everybody was getting notice that don't collaborate with anybody outside of China, because I'm an independent filmmaker based in New York. So after working with them for a month, I think they had a lot of hesitations because they were afraid of angering the government, because the way we portray the lockdown in 76 days, it was really brutal. I mean, we actually showed the absolute panic and fear at the very beginning of how the hospitals were overwhelmed. But even at the end of the film, it's very complex. Even though Wuhan survived the lockdown in a very positive way, but still there has been so much lives lost, so many lives lost, and there's very complex feelings people are still feeling about this episode in recent history. So we're not sure how the government is going to perceive this. That's one reason. The second reason being, there have been a growing numbers of internet trolls in China who are increasingly nationalistic, who perceive any potentially negative portrayal of the government as unpatriotic. They will come after you and attack you. So because of both of these reasons, especially because my third co-director is working for a state-owned newspaper, so he was afraid of getting into trouble and maybe he will lose his job.
Were you concerned about the footage that had been shot by your two co-directors? Were you concerned at all about somehow that footage being censored by the Chinese government?
We've been really careful during the production. Yes, we didn't want anybody to know we were working with this film. So we started collaborating in February, and all the way up until early July, we didn't tell anybody about the fact we were working on this film, because we wanted as few people to know about the existence of this project as possible, because we just didn't want any potential interference from the government. We didn't raise any money. We finished only after the film was accepted into Toronto International Film Festival. Only at that time did we go out and look for a finishing fund from Sundance and XTR Film Society. And also in the first few months as the film traveled to different festivals, we consciously shied away from giving interviews or any reporting to Chinese language media, because we really want to make sure we don't bring any trouble to my anonymous co-director.
So has there been any thought about given to possibly revisiting these subjects, using your two co-directors once the pandemic is more in our review mirror, to see how Wuhan is coping in the aftermath of everything?
No, we haven't thought about that. I think we feel extremely fortunate that we started production so early, like in beginning of February 2020, and we were able to finish the film and premiere it. And the film right now can be streamed pretty much anywhere in the world. At the same time, I knew of many other COVID films currently in production or just entered distribution. So Chinese filmmakers who are working on the aftermath in Wuhan, how Wuhan, the city, try to recover from this trauma. So I'm right now just looking forward to watching my friends and colleagues, storytelling around the global pandemic. So right now we don't have any interest to go back and redo another film about the Wuhan experience.
All right. Well, Hao Wu, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on our panel in just a little bit.
Thank you, Charlie.